Welcome to episode 10 of Switching Screens. I'm Anthony Doyle, as always. With me is Josh Howe. Last week we didn't have an episode because I had some stuff going on. Josh had some stuff going on. We couldn't quite get the scheduling worked out. I thought 2 weeks ago when we did the episode with just the two of us, it worked really well. I liked the dynamic of it. It felt more conversational. I wanted to do that again because I really liked the tone it set. We will go back to having guests, but I'm happy to just be doing me and you this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's start with the big one. And I said this before we started recording. I didn't actually get a chance to watch this game yet. The Bucks versus Lakers last night is what everybody that I've seen is talking about this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it's a really interesting game. The numbers are interesting from it. I don't know how consequential it is, but LeBron went off last night.
Yeah. Yeah, he pretty much was controlling the whole game. He had like 37 points. I mean, he went to the free throw line. He had 15 free throw attempts. Like, dude was getting to the line. This is the crazy thing about the Bucks game. This is the most interesting thing to me. This is the first time I think the first time we've seen it all. The Bucks lose a game where pretty much it had nothing to do with three-pointers. The Lakers shot 18.8% from three.
Yep.
So they didn't shoot well, and the Bucks were obviously, like they're always doing, they're inviting them to shoot those. And even if you just go watch like the LeBron highlights from last night's game, like he's just getting to the rim because he's stronger than everybody. It's still like one of the most underrated things about LeBron is he's just stronger than everyone else, even guys that are bigger than him. Like there was a couple times where he took Giannis to school still, and Giannis is, like, as we know, an incredible defender, probably should win Defensive Player of the Year. And LeBron just blew by him on this one possession and then, like, ran into Lopez. I got hit and then, like, finished an and one. It was insane. Like, he was just getting to the rim at will. He dunked on Lopez at 1 point too. Like, the guys were there. Like, the wall was there that the Bucks always have. And LeBron just went right through it. I mean, like, there are some stuff, obviously, that, like, there's a lot of pick and roll action. And a lot of the times, like, JaVale McGee would, like, he knew, like, LeBron wasn't looking to pass, which was kind of weird because LeBron, obviously, we know, loves to pass. But he would, like, JaVale McGee would come up and set the screen, and then he would run down and just, like, pin Lopez back to give LeBron extra space. And then LeBron would get, like, a little bit of a runway and then just take off. And once he was, like, in the air, nobody wanted to touch him. So it was crazy. Like, he was just getting whatever he wanted, and it's one of the only teams that you could see actually do that. The Clippers probably could too, because Kawhi is also super strong. But, like, you don't see this happen almost ever.
So Middleton had a really bad game. 5 for 19 from the field, 12 points.
Yeah.
Who took the primary assignment on him last night?
I think, who was the primary? I think was it Danny? I think it was Danny Green.
Okay.
Yeah, but I remember switching a lot.
Middleton just missed 2 games due to injury.
He missed
the game against the Thunder, the game against the Hornets. Since he came back, he was 4 for 16 in the game they lost against Miami. He had a decent night against Indiana, and then he was 5 for 19 against the Lakers. So he might be dealing with something. And They didn't have George Hill. If I was a Bucks fan, I wouldn't really be worried about this game. If I was a Lakers fan, I would be excited about this game.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most exciting thing for Lakers fans about the win is that you have at least a 1-game sample that shows that there is a way for this particular team with this personnel to beat the Bucks without having to go bananas from 3. And if you're the Bucks, all this stuff happened. Your game plan technically still worked, and you were close the entire game. And this is with Giannis. Like, I think, was it in the third quarter that he had the spill?
Yeah.
Where he fell. Yeah. So it was like in the latter half of the game where Giannis also, he's playing part of the game. Obviously, we know now with a bit of an injury, playing sore. So, I mean, I wouldn't be that concerned if I was a Bucks fan, just like you said. Like, yeah, it happens. These games happen. LeBron's amazing still. So what are you going to do?
I mean, the Bucks might not get to 70 wins, but that's neither here nor there.
I kind of think, like, some of this stuff, like, I feel like it's good. that happened. If like for the Bucks, like they just don't have to worry about it anymore. It's just completely off their minds. They always will talk about like Giannis has said so many times because people will continue to ask. And he said so many times like, we don't really care about it. Like it's in the back of our heads a little bit, but whatever. Now there's no question. There won't have to be any questions about it. They won't have to think about it at all. It can just be out of their heads entirely, not just sitting in the back. Just nothing there. Like just don't worry about it. I think that's better for a team like that, to be honest.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I think facing a little bit of adversity isn't bad for you. And somebody mentioned to me the other day, and I can't remember who it was. They said if the Warriors had won the title the year they went 73-9.
Yeah.
Do you think the Bucks would have chased 74? I don't know the answer to that, but I do wonder if maybe like they didn't because the Warriors lost the title that year because of how it's remembered. It's as dominant as the Bucks are. Winning 16 in the playoffs is really hard. And the Bucks keep looking. They've lost 2 of their last 3 games, but it's the only time they've lost 2 or 3 games all season? Or no, they lost 2 of their first 4. So
oh yeah.
They haven't lost consecutive games all year. They're incredibly dominant. You got to worry a little bit about Giannis if the knee is an issue. But aside from that, if Giannis is still good, they'll be fine. And I look at that free throw total and that foul total from last night's game, and I have to assume in the playoffs you're not going to see foul counts like that.
No, doubt it.
So.
Yeah.
Aside from that, like just looking through it's a fun time to be watching basketball. Like I watched a little bit of the Memphis-Dallas game last night, and Dallas is really good right now. I caught a little bit of the Boston-Utah game. It's nice to see the Celtics lose and give the Raptors a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah, I didn't see any of that game at all, but I was a little surprised by the Chaz pulling that one out because they've been in such a free fall lately.
I mean, Boston started semi.
That's true. Yeah, they've got a lot of injuries right now. That's fair.
And was that Kemba's first or second game back? Like he hasn't.
I think he was out last game, so I think it might be his first.
Yeah. So I mean, let's move on to the Kenny Atkinson news. Just this morning, Kenny Atkinson was fired as the Nets head coach. I don't get it. I know the place everybody jumps to is this is Kyrie. And my natural instinct is when everybody goes to one answer, try to find something else that might be going on. But I have a hard time with this one. The Nets are the 7th seed right now. They're 28-34. It's not a great record, but they don't have Durant at all. Kyrie's missed a lot of games this season. They gave DeAndre Jordan a lot of money, and he's just not good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Like, I didn't expect the Nets to be considerably better than they are. So, aside from it being something with there was issues in the locker room, I'm not sure I really get what they're doing here.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I woke up to this news and was like, okay, that's unexpected. Because Kenny Atkinson's, by all accounts, a good coach and a well-respected coach. I think he was part of the reason. I remember this at the time, but do you remember like when KD was making his decision that he was coming to the Nets, and like didn't he at some point say something or cite something about like Kenny Atkinson being a reason why he was coming? He's like he likes Kenny Atkinson.
I thought he had a really good reputation around the league. Like I really did think that. And when I look at who's out there for options, I don't see anybody that I really love for the job unless they're going to reach and try to grab a first-time head coach. But, like, Kyrie and Durant doesn't seem like the team where you want somebody just learning the ropes.
No. Yeah, and there's a few teams right now that should be reaching out to Kenny Atkinson already. The Cavaliers and the Knicks among them. But Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of weird because Woj mentioned this morning, like he didn't say too much in his tweets about it, but he kind of just said like they had conversations, or Atkinson and Sean Marks did, and that there was like a sense that a change was inevitable, which seems like a weird inevitable. Just seems like an odd word to use there.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't understand what's up with this. Like this team, like the idea. I assumed, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I assumed that the Nets organization as a whole kind of knew that there was going to be patience required when they got Kyrie and KD. Like KD was never going to play this year. Like you pretty much are punting this year. I don't know what you expected out of this year. Like your roster, like the Nets roster is good. It's fine. It's like a low playoff seed, and integrating Kyrie has never proven to be an easy thing on a new team. Like I don't understand if firing Atkinson was part of something that didn't work out here, like on the floor. I have no idea what that would be, because like this is basically, it was just like a transition year for them. It's really weird.
Kyrie's going to be on his 7th coach in 9 seasons now?
Yeah.
I know early on with the Cavs, everyone talked about, their organization being a mess, and it was before LeBron came back. And there's been a lot of stuff going on in Kyrie's career on teams that he's been on where it's hard to entirely blame it on him. But also it's becoming harder and harder not to put some of it on him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
How does... This was always the weird thing about putting Kyrie and Kevin Durant on the same team to me, is you have two guys who, I don't know if they love the drama, but they don't run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And neither one of them really seems like they're a natural leader. Both of them seem like they really like to be passive-aggressive with their teammates. And now you are throwing a weird coaching situation into the mix, and we still don't know what Kevin Durant's going to look like next season. 7-footers in their 30s with an Achilles injury. The history's not great.
It's not. It really isn't.
So I'd like to see the Nets compete. I'd like to see every team be fun and good, but
yeah,
I'm concerned about this situation.
Yeah, it seems like a lot. I mean, I know like right now you have to do everything you can, I guess, especially in terms of like keeping KD happy. You have to do everything you can to kind of placate those guys, but especially KD. But like, I don't know, man. Like, what happens if next season starts and KD just isn't KD anymore, or he's like 70% of KD? Like, I don't know. I'm really nervous about it because I'd love KD to come back and be himself. But
I mean, what do you do about the fact that there's a serious conversation this year about whether they've been better with Kyrie running the show or Dinwiddie running the show?
Yeah, that's the thing too. The Kyrie thing is so strange to me. Like, so we've gotten to the point where, like, I think we're all in agreement now. Everyone that watches basketball all the time, that Kyrie can't be the number one option on a title contender. And yet he's such a high usage, high volume kind of player. It's difficult. And then you throw in the personality stuff that just like, whatever it is. And if he's dealing with something or isn't dealing with something internally, I don't want to like talk. There's so much stuff going on there that I don't really want to dive into that. But like, it's in some cases, it's definitely like isolated his teammates, or his teammates have felt like they don't really know how to approach him or whatever. And when you throw in like the type of player he is, it just seems to make things not work. And now he's going to have to get integrated with another player who may or may not still be great, who has like a similar type of game in terms of like usage. He's way more efficient. But in terms of like needing the ball in his hands and stuff like that, and Kyrie's never been a great off-ball player. Even when he was with LeBron, it was more like a your turn, my turn type thing. So like, I really don't know how this is going to turn out, and I'm kind of nervous for the Nets because I mean they did everything right technically to get where they are and dig themselves out of that big hole they made, and yet it might just not work.
I I don't know the answers to any of this. I look at some of the things that the Boston guys have said this season, and you look at quotes from some of those young guys in Boston this season, and it seems like they're talking about Kyrie when they talk about the differences between this year and last year.
Yeah,
When they talk about this team feels like they're more together, it feels like everybody's on the same page. It sounds to me like they're talking about Kyrie.
it really does. Yeah.
So
And it just like it doesn't it just feel like I've said this like all season, like when I'm watching the Celtics, it just feels like there's so much more of a sense of like understanding and joy is an overused word in basketball, but like um just yeah, like you said, togetherness. Like just watching them on the floor, like they just kind of feel like they know what's happening now. Like there was always a confusion, and no matter where Kyrie's been, except for pretty much when he's been with LeBron, there's always been a confusion about like what's happening. Only not just off the floor, but what's happening on the floor too. It's a really weird thing.
this team fits Brad Stevens so much better.
That's
It
true too.
it really feels like this is such a good team for what he wants out of a group of players, and I like watching this team, and that's weird as a Raptors fan to say, but I really like watching these Celtics. They're fun to watch. They're a really talented team, and they're going to be dangerous in the playoffs.
They really are. Yeah.
So now we both kind of had this in our notes coming into the show today. The Siakam stuff that's going on right now.
Oh yeah.
So it's been a rough season for him. Like that first month and a half was absolutely incredible. He looked like he was ready to be it was being tossed around that he might be a top 10 player in the NBA. Clearly he hasn't been that over the course of the season as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But he started the All-Star game. He deserved to start the All-Star game.
Yep.
And I have trouble with this one because like we tend to forget that growing as a player is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was talking about this on the radio the other night where they asked me about Siakam, but I was saying when you look at the injuries the Raptors have had this season and you look at how each of those injuries has impacted him, not just his own injuries, but everybody else getting hurt. Every time somebody gets hurt, it tends to be Pascal Siakam who's asked to pick up the slack somewhere or another. Marc Gasol goes down, he's asked to do more rebounding and more quarterbacking the defense. Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet goes down, he's asked to run the offense more. And he seems to be the guy who just, the expectation is he's going to find a way to fill that hole.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot for a guy who 2 years ago was like a bench player who his offensive role was finishing in transition.
Yeah.
Like, and also, I look at Siakam and I say, like, he's in, like, his 9th year of organized basketball.
Yep.
Most players play 9 years of organized basketball before they get to the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as much as he's 25, he's not young for an NBA player. He's also pretty young in his basketball life. And you can still watch him, and you saw it more last year than this year, but even this year, you still see him. He has moments where he's figuring out who he is as a player still. Yeah. And I think we just need to have patience with that, and if that means the Raptors can't truly compete this year like everybody wanted them to, that has to be fine. We just have to, he's still on his rookie contract this year. Move to next season.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a big rant about this on the radio too the other day, which it was kind of like I kind of brought on myself because I wanted to get this out to as many people as I could if they were listening. Because I've tweeted about it too and received a lot of flack for my opinions on Siakam on Twitter as well, which I find hilarious.
You got flack for having an opinion on Twitter? I don't believe it.
Yeah, wow, what a shock, right? Man, just having opinions. By the way, this is a funny thing. I think was it you? Maybe you mentioned it, but or maybe a couple people have. But like once you get to like a certain amount of followers on Twitter, like you just start to like receive more, like out of nowhere, kind of like more random people in your mentions. Like just either aggressively attacking your opinions or sometimes just randomly like agreeing with you and stuff. It's slowly starting to happen to me, and I don't know if I need this or not.
The
But
whole yeah, not to go completely off topic here, but the whole Twitter
yeah,
experience really does change somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 followers. Because up until
yeah,
that point, the people who are following you, it's mostly people follow you for very specific reasons. You don't have a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
people who just happen to follow you to that point.
right,
And so they're there, you know, your sense of humor, your style of tweeting, the people who are following you, they already know what it is coming in. But
yeah,
somewhere around, like, somewhere in that 2,000, 3,000 range, it becomes there are people following you because you have a lot of followers. They aren't
yeah,
there for who you are. They're there because they feel like you're someone who matters, so they should be following you. And once you get into having those people follow you, what they expect from you is sometimes something completely different than what you've ever been as a Twitter personality. And it's like
yeah,
there were jokes I could make 2 years ago on Twitter, and the only response I would get would be LOL. And now I
yeah.
get people who are like, "How could you say that? How could you suggest that?" It's like, I, it's a joke. It's
Yeah.
not serious.
Yeah, I've had to start doing that more. Like where you say you put the tweet out there, and then like in parentheses below it, you have to be like, "This is a joke, people. Like I promise, it's not that serious." Yeah, I did one like with Siakam like a while ago. Like the Raptors, it was like when he went down with injury. It was like one of the first games after that, and the Raptors won. And I was like, "Oh, the Raptors are better without Siakam" or something. Like I made some joke, and like I got assaulted. Like people came after me. They were like, "What are you talking about? Of course not." Blah. And I was like, "Yeah, clearly, all right." Okay, no more jokes, I guess. Um, I don't know. They need to make a You know what? Everyone keeps asking for an edit button on Twitter, which I don't want, but I could use a sarcasm font or something. That would be
That
useful.
yeah, I don't want an edit button either, but sarcasm would be a sarcasm indicator would be fantastic. Although then people would start to use the sarcasm indicator sarcastically.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's true. That would open up another can of worms. Um, yeah, okay. But so I was gonna say about getting back to Siakam. Like, so I think the main thing to think about here is well, a couple things. So, like, and you mentioned this already, but the expectations because of what happened early on in the season changed everything. I always think expectations are often the worst things in a lot of different things, but especially in sports, because coming into this season, uh, the expectations and ideas, at least from an organizational perspective, were a lot different and kind of remain a lot different in a way. Than what the fan expectations were. So coming into the season, it was, the Raptors weren't able to do a lot because they were capped out in the summer. They lost Kawhi Leonard, they lost Danny Green. Siakam is their guy now. The max doesn't kick in until the next year, not this season. This is a bit of a transition season. The focus is on growing OG Anunoby, on growing Pascal Siakam, getting them into larger roles, seeing what they can do. Working the way towards the playoffs, hopefully. And when they get there, see how that goes. But essentially, it's a growth season, an interim season, because the long game was always about the summer 2021 when a bunch of guys become free agents, including Giannis. So this season was always kind of like not a punt season, but a season where it's like you're just trying to have a good year, a solid year. Kyle Lowry sticks around, like you're still a competitive team. You show that you're competitive for upcoming free agents. You continue to grow internally, all that stuff. Like a guy like Terrence Davis gets time. That's kind of what it was. And then all of a sudden, the beginning of the season starts. The Raptors start off on fire. Pascal Siakam's looking like a top 10 player. And all of a sudden, all the expectations change. All of a sudden, it's okay, well, Siakam is this guy now.
I've had
And
this. I've said this a bunch of times on the radio over the last couple of times. I feel like it's been almost every time I've been on the radio. You can pinpoint the exact moment that expectations changed. It was that fourth quarter against the Lakers
the Lakers,
without
yeah.
Lowry and Ibaka, where it
Yeah.
was like, this is they're playing a team that's going to be one of the best teams in the league this year. They're playing without two of their core guys, and they go into a tight fourth quarter with LeBron and Anthony Davis on the floor. The expectation was, okay, the Lakers are going to win this game, and that's okay because the Raptors are shorthanded. And then Siakam outplayed LeBron and Anthony Davis for the fourth quarter. And, like, that was one of the best quarters of basketball I've ever seen him play. He was phenomenal at both ends of the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like that moment, all of a sudden it became, okay, he can be this guy. Now we need him to be this guy every game. That's not how it works.
It's not. So then the rest of the season happens, and the thing that fans don't seem to remember, don't seem interested in remembering, is that growth is a linear process. And I've seen a lot of people start to use this on Twitter, from Raptors Twitter perspective, that kind of agree with the sentiment that line. I've seen Lewis use it. I've used it. Blake used it probably earlier than all of us.
I want to talking. Katie Heindel, who wrote a piece on Raptors.com about Siakam.
She did.
And it was fantastic.
Yeah, everything Katie writes is amazing. Everyone should go read Katie. But yeah, she did. She did write about Siakam. That's a fantastic piece. I read that. It was great. And she's right. She talks about in that piece, like, his journey, right? And that's one of the most important things to remember here, because in the larger context, like, everyone thinks about Siakam like this. Like, if you're watching it on video, you can see like his rise. Like, if it was on a chart, people think about Siakam's career like going just straight like this, but it's really not. It's like this and like that and like this and like that and like this. And it continues to be that way. So it's up and down and up and down. He takes leaps, he does, and he's taken historic ones, but he's also taken steps back as he's been figuring those things out. Like, he had a historically bad 3-point shooting season. The fact that he now can just like pull up from three and we're expecting those shots to go in, that's insane. Even last year, people weren't like, that was a question in the summer was, is that something he's going to be able to have in his game as a number one guy? Because he needs it in this NBA. Can he do that? Can he even pull up? Like, will he have a mid-range game? Stuff like that. Like, he's doing these things.
Last year, 97.5% of his three-point makes were assisted. 68% of them were corner threes. This year, 64% are assisted. 22% are corner threes. This whole idea that he can pull up above the break is just, it didn't happen. It was not something he did. And all of a sudden, it's there, and he's good at it. And even just month to month, you can, if you're looking close enough, you can see growth in his game. I saw things the other night where all of a sudden he was starting to read the doubles before they got there and making the passes out and finding guys out there. And when you look at the big games that guys like OG Anunoby have had and Norman Powell have had lately, a lot of that is them benefiting from the attention that Pascal Siakam he's making those reads and he's opening up the defense for the guys around him. And these are things he has to learn that aren't necessarily going to show up on the stat sheet. Like, if you're... my mic apparently is too low. I will turn it up. If you are suddenly making those reads on double teams, if you're making those passes out, if you're making the game easier for the guys around you, you're not necessarily going to be scoring more points. You're not even going to be necessarily getting more assists, because it might be 2 passes away before you get to the point where that's a bucket. But you're making your team better. And that's like, that's what I want from him. That's what Kyle Lowry's always been to the Raptors, as the leader. And if Siakam is the next leader of the Raptors, we don't know what's happening in 2021, but right now he's the guy who is probably in that role. That's what I want from him. Is I want him to be able to take that Kyle Lowry role of saying, whether or not this benefits my numbers, it helps the team win, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's the thing, too. Like, people, again, those expectations of top 10 player are brutal, because he has improved a lot. Like, people talk about his defense being worse. Well, I think it's been more like not worse. I think it's been more inconsistent. And, like, some games he's been really good on that end. And other games it's been harder, and a lot of it again goes back to the role and how much he's doing offensively now too. They're asking so much of him, but he's been fine there. I think his playmaking has been better in a lot of ways, and obviously, like we already mentioned, his shooting has improved immensely. Like the guy's still finishing. Like sometimes it doesn't look like it because people always talk about like all the bunnies and stuff he's missing at the rim. But if you look at like the season long numbers, when he gets into the restricted area, he's still finishing pretty much as well as he did last year, which is insane because last year like all those looks were a lot easier for him. Um, like
Where he's struggling this year is like the 3 to 10 foot range. He's
yeah.
seen a pretty significant drop off there, and that's where the doubles are hitting him a lot. Is he when he's like, and I feel like the Raptors have. This is a Nick Nurse thing, and I could go on a whole other rant here. The Raptors do this thing where they force Siakam post ups when it's a bad matchup sometimes, and
Yeah.
people think that's bad offensive decision making. One thing that has really changed about my opinion of Nick Nurse from last season to this season is last season, going into the playoffs, I had this idea that there were things Nick Nurse didn't know how to do because there were things that the Raptors had struggled with doing. And what we saw in the playoffs was suddenly those bad decisions turned into good ones because Nick Nurse knew what he had. All of those bad decisions that we thought he was making throughout the season, I feel like what we missed was that wasn't bad decision making. That was him making sure he knew what was a good decision when he needed to know that. And I think when you look at a lot of the things the Raptors are doing badly this year are Nurse making sure that he knows when we get to the playoffs, this is what I have and this is who I can trust. And, you know, we're going to see dividends on that again this year. I'm not saying we're going to win a championship again, but Nurse, he's playing a longer game.
Yeah.
And like, so I think there's things that are happening on the court with the Raptors, and this plays into, we could talk about Pat McCaw here. We could talk about some of the times that Fred VanVleet and Norman Powell do way too much with the ball in their heads. I think there's a method to the madness of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, at this point, I think you kind of have to after what happened last year.
So I think with Siakam, there's going to be a point where the Raptors have to pare down his offensive game to say, okay, these are the things you do best to attack this matchup. And these are the things we need you to do in this playoff series. But also, I think that's a thing they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And especially once they're healthy and you have, Kyle Lowry's has been healthy for a little while now. Once Fred VanVleet's back, which I just saw a little bit ago, they're hopeful he might play tomorrow.
Yeah.
And once Marc Gasol is back especially, you have a lot of other guys around Siakam who can put him in a position to succeed. And that's another thing that's been missing with the injuries this year, is there have been a lot of nights where he's playing in lineups where nobody else on the court helps him get in a position to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the tough things. Yeah, like you're saying. I think sometimes it's tough because, like, with all the injuries, there'll be times where Nurse will put out a lineup and, like, Siakam's the only creator on the floor, and there's just, like, no spacing. And then they'll just, like, give the ball to Siakam on the perimeter, and they're like, okay, go figure it out. And he's just, like, looking at the floor like, okay. Like that's not his fault. Like there's a lot of stuff like that with the injuries in particular that that just make it a lot harder for him. And I do think sometimes in those scenarios, like I think Nurse, it does help Nurse, like you're talking about going forward, because like at least like he can look at those groups now and be like, okay, here's what Siakam can do with literally no spacing and no other creators on the floor. This is like in isolation. This is how good this guy can be. And like sometimes he's good enough still that he figures it out. And then there's like nights like the other night, like against the Warriors, where Siakam pretty much was having another off night for the most part. And then down the stretch when they needed to close the game and have a couple clutch buckets, they actually put him in pick and roll, which I've wanted to see a lot more of this season. And he went to work and scored and got a couple of the main buckets, a couple of clutch reps as the guy down the stretch. And that was awesome to see. And there's another thing that Nurse can look at and say, hey, this worked down the stretch before. And I think like, at least on one of those possessions, Norman Powell was the screener too, which was interesting. I love it when They do the pick and roll for Siakam, and they'll have Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet as the screener. It's one of my favorite things because no one on the floor ever expects those guys to be good at screening, and Lowry in particular is amazing.
I feel like every Raptors blogger goes nuts when they start doing that stuff.
It's amazing. It's one of like Raptors Twitter's favorite things. Yes, I think
part of me wonders if they don't do that more just because they don't want teams to have too much film with it.
Yeah, they might.
It's not like Kyle Lowry's trying to save his body. That's not his game.
No, never. God.
I don't know. This has been such a fun Raptors season, and I get so frustrated when they have a bad game and Raptors Twitter turns into, well, what are they going to do about this and this and this? It's like, if it happens, it happens. Like, if they get into a series against the Bucks and they lose in 4 or 5 games, the Bucks are great. Like,
Bucks are great.
The Raptors won the championship last year. They lost Kawhi and Danny Green. This wasn't supposed to be a season where they contended. And if they can, awesome. If they can't, you learn what you have to build going forward. I have such a hard time stressing about this season at all, and I don't really understand why so many Raptors fans are trying to, look at this as a season where it has to be, like, this is not a 1-year sample size of this Raptors team. This is them building the next core going forward. This is finding out what the post-Lowry Raptors are going to be and having the ability to do that while Kyle Lowry is still a member of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, Norman Powell looks great. That contract went from last summer looking like, how are they going to move this if they need to before we get to 2021 to he's being really underpaid now.
Yeah.
Siakam looks great. That max contract is worth it no matter how you feel about the season he's having.
Yep.
OG has suddenly broken out over the last couple of weeks. And, I want to just talk about for a second. OG Anunoby has become one of the best defenders in the league on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of pressure he can put on a ball handler, and when we talk about guys who get a lot of steals, there are 2 types of guys who do it. There are guys who gamble all the time, and they rack up the steal totals, and so people think they're a good defender, but they're also out of position all the time. And then there's the guys who get a lot of steals by a function of always being in the right spot, and OG is the second guy. He puts that pressure on the defender, but it also seems like when he's doing it, he's never out of position, and there's never an advantage for the offense that's being created because he's putting that ball pressure on.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because OG's always been a great defender, but when he was first starting out, and last year a lot of people talked about it's kind of a wash year for a lot of reasons, but in his rookie year, and he's a rookie, so important to keep that in mind. But he was always a great on-ball defender. When he saw the guy right in front of him, he was able to swallow him up more times than not. He's almost always been the guy that the Raptors have been like, okay, you can go handle the other team's best player, and we'll let our best offensive player not have to deal with that. And it's been interesting because he's always been good at sticking to a guy and latching onto a guy on the perimeter and not letting go. Now he's still amazing at that, but he's starting to read things quicker. He's starting to see plays before they happen. He's had so many steals in passing lanes the past several games, where he's just is oh, I see this. It's about to happen. I know where this pass is going. Boom. He's got it. He's out. He's running. That game against Denver, he was just he was reading everything. He knew exactly where the ball was going. He saw it in either the guy's eyes or was reading the play. He just had great anticipation. His reflexes are so quick and his hands are so fast that he's already out and got the ball before the other guy even really knows that the pass was halfway to the other guy. And I think that's become one of the biggest things about him as a defender is he's not just seeing what's in front of him anymore. He's kind of seeing the game as a whole. He's gotten better as a help defender too, especially with Nurse really wanting his guys to be making those digs on the ball all the time when guys drive into the paint. So I think that's been.
It's become that Kawhi-esque thing where you don't want to run your offense anywhere near him.
It's starting to be like that thing. Like Zach Lowe, I think, was the one who came up with it. But like when Kawhi was like prime Kawhi defensively, and he was just like every single night, it was like he had octopus arms, like just they were everywhere. And like if you went anywhere near him, the ball was going to be gone. Like OG's starting to look like that in a lot of these games.
I mean, I know there's a couple people on Raptors Twitter who go nuts about him as an offensive player. I always want to pump the brakes on that a little bit because he's shown signs of understanding his functional strength offensively, which is a big deal for him. His shooting's always been good. And I remember last year watching him in Summer League, and I feel like last season, before Summer League, he had kind of reworked his shot. Because when you watched that Summer League, you could see his motion was different and it was much more efficient. And when he was coming off screens behind the three-point line, he was coming up with a very clean motion. And then, last season, obviously all the off-court stuff happened at the beginning of the year that affected him, and then the appendix in the playoffs. Like, we don't talk... Maybe we should talk more about, like, how disrupted OG's early career has been and how that's probably a bigger role than any sort of slumps he's had. Because, like, his rookie season, he didn't have a summer league. He didn't have a training camp because he was coming off...
Injury, yeah.
He came off a torn ACL, like, in January the year before. I remember at the draft they said the Raptors might not have him till February or March, and he was ready to play in October.
Yeah.
And then, last year he had the off-court stuff, the appendix. There was one other injury last year, and I can't remember what it was at the moment.
Yeah, I don't remember. There been so many injuries the past 2 seasons that I'm honestly starting to lose track. I was saying, like, I tweeted this a few nights ago about how, like, last season the main thing that the Raptors couldn't stop having was, like, hand injuries, and this season it's, like, eye injuries. And then Blake Murphy messaged me or tweeted at me below, and he's like, "Oh, they've also had like 5 or 6 hand injuries." And I was like, I am losing my mind. I was like, at every single thing. I honestly don't know anymore what injury. Like, there's so many.
Everything's been hurt this year with the Raptors.
Yeah, everything.
I just hope we get to see them healthy in the playoffs. Like, Marc Gasol was having such a great run of games before he got hurt again. Duman Hernandez, who I've heard was good for a little while there when he was playing with the 905, has now been out since December.
Yeah. Ankle sprain.
And when Gasol and Ibaka were both down, they definitely could have used another big body if he'd been available. And like, all the credit to Rondé and Boucher and these guys who have tried to fill in. There's a big difference between having Rondé Hollis Jefferson guarding the paint and Marc Gasol doing it. I was asked the question the other day, and I want to put this one to you. How much do you worry about even if the Raptors get healthy for the playoffs, how much do you worry about the toll, fatigue-wise, all of the injuries and all of the different role changes that guys have had throughout the season will take that can't even completely be mitigated by just getting healthy?
I don't know. I'm not so concerned about it. I mean, like, because a lot of guys have had to play that I necessarily wouldn't have been playing that many minutes before and won't be playing that many minutes in the playoffs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, in a way, I kind of feel like it's the bright side to the whole thing is that, like, Nurse gets to play a bunch of guys, see what some of these guys can give, and, like, get these guys comfortable and get them involved in case, like, there's a break glass if necessary moment in the playoffs and stuff like that. But I don't really, like, worry about them being, like, ground down too much. Like, I don't know.
So what you're saying is Pat McCaw is still under 1,000 minutes for the season, so we should be fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'll be well rested for the playoffs.
He's ready to go, man. That eighth man spot is his, and he's ready to take it into the playoffs.
I I get so like I catch myself getting frustrated with McCaw too, and I definitely have a lot of tweets about it.
Yeah,
Um, Nick Nurse loves Pat McCaw,
he
and
does.
it doesn't completely make sense to me. And I know you watch Blake Murphy's Twitter, and Blake asks Nurse on a regular basis about McCaw, and Nurse's
He
answers
does.
have been consistent that he sees him as a rotation guy for this team. But then
Yep.
every once in a while we get to see a little bit about. I think we get to see a little bit of the Pat McCaw that Nick Nurse sees,
Mm-hmm.
and well, he's not a good off-ball defender. He gets lost a lot. He dies on screens. Um, his on-ball defense can be solid sometimes.
It can be. Yep.
Um, his shooting is a concern. He's not a great shooter, but he has moments where he can create for other guys that he looks okay doing that. Like there are things that Patrick McCaw does okay. The
Mm-hmm.
hard part seems to be limiting him to contributing in those ways without him doing way more than he needs to be doing.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I feel like a lot of people are concerned because, like, even when McCon tops out, he seems to top out as an okay player, which I also feel. But I mean, like, that's not so bad when you're talking about a guy who's eighth in the rotation. The problem is, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this as well, is that Terrence Davis is a guy who's on the team, and he probably is better than Patrick McCall already, and it probably deserves that eighth spot. Um,
I mean, Terrence Davis is so good.
Yeah, and see, here's the thing. So one of the things I think when you're talking about like what does Nurse see in McCaw, and sometimes we see what he sees. I think one of those things is confidence. Like McCaw is so much better when he's decisive. He's so much more valuable when he's like not hesitating at shooting threes because he's actually been good from the corners when he's shooting threes from the corners and attacking the rim. Like when he's decisive instead of hesitating or doing the momentary pause dribbles, and he just is attacking the rim in a lot of those scenarios and just making like clear cut passes and stuff like that. He's actually decent, but he seems to waver so much, and I'm not sure why. And maybe it's because his natural instinct is to be a playmaker all the time, but um, he always seems to like hesitate. Whereas Terrence Davis, if you couldn't give that guy more confidence, like he's ready to launch it whenever he possibly can. So
He takes some terrible heat check threes sometimes, but
he
then like
does.
he can hit those too. Like
Hmm.
he
Yeah, he can. He can. I mean,
his
it's
true
it's
shooting percentage is 60%, and
yeah. I mean, that dude's a sniper on catch and shoot shots though. Like all season long, like he basically is Norman Powell light is essentially what he is.
he's shooting 9.7 threes per 100 possessions, and he's shooting 40% on them.
Yeah.
I There were parts early in the season where I caught myself feeling like I was letting the hyperbole get the better of me with Terrence Davis, where it was
Hmm.
the hype was taking over, and I was just like I was getting so excited about him that I wasn't putting it in context,
Hmm.
and yet those numbers that I felt like I was overhyping early in the season, he's now over 1,000 total minutes for the season. They haven't really substantially gotten worse.
No.
And when I watch him play, well, the numbers haven't gotten worse. His comfort level has gone up,
Yeah.
and like he's improving as a defender. He still struggles sometimes, but he's
Yep.
getting there.
Yeah.
And once the team is whole, and he can kind of play that role where he's best suited to, where he's always out there next to Fred or Kyle, and he's always got Mark or Pascal out there with him, which you assume during the playoffs you're going to be able to arrange that. So he's always got a good
Yep.
big man out there with him. He's always got another guard out there who could be a steadying hand, so he doesn't get too far out of control. Like he fits what the Raptors are going to need really well. And what
Yeah.
the question was coming into the season was how do they find enough scoring from the wing positions with Kawhi and Danny Green gone, the answer to me is, if they're healthy, is Norman Powell and Terrence Davis. And I'm comfortable with that answer. Like, I'm comfortable that Norman Powell, who can suddenly finish in traffic and is good at it.
Yeah.
And, like, the Raptors, this is where I get caught up in the championship talk, is I don't think they should contend, but I see the path.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. The Raptors, the thing with this team has always been the offense, right? That has always been the question with this team, is how are they going to score in the half court in the playoffs? And now you see like some of the ways that maybe that can happen. Like the Norm thing is a great, just unexpected thing that happened. Like, I don't think anybody factored that into it as actually being like part of the Raptors' internal growth this season. Like, everybody's so focused on OG and Siakam that I don't think anybody really saw this coming with Norm, where it's like now suddenly this guy is like becoming a walking bucket. That's so important for this team, especially.
They're fourth in the league in opponent 2-point percentage, and first in the league in opponent 3-point percentage, and they have the fifth best 3-point percentage in the league. The Raptors, like, they have an identity. They shoot really well, and they can keep guys on the floor almost all the time. Like, the Raptors can, when they're healthy, they can field 5 guys who are 37% 3-point shooters, and they have a couple different pieces that they can move around while still doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they can defend the 3-point line really well with those same lineups. That's an identity.
Yeah, they know who they are for sure, which is interesting. Again, I think this team could beat any team in a 7-game series. I feel like it's hard to know because of all the injuries, but like, I feel like the offensive droughts are a concern, especially when it comes to 3-point shooting.
So,
the Raptors, like what happened with the Raptors against the Bucks, where they just couldn't. Yeah.
I want to ask you one other question I've been thinking about, which is kind of on topic here, though. Coming off that big win streak, going into the All-Star break, everybody was saying the Raptors are going to get 60 wins for the first time. Then they had that 3-game skid. And now where they're sitting, they have to go 16-4 in their final 20 games to get to 60.
Okay.
There are 2 concerns for me. Number one is going to be, with Boston skidding a little bit, there's a chance there's some meaningless games at the end of the season where they have the 2 seed locked up. And
yeah.
But the other one is, there's a reasonable number of legitimately tough games left. They have a game in Utah, in Philly, in Milwaukee, in Houston, and at Miami. And then for home games, they have a game against the Bucks, Boston, Denver, and the Lakers. So that's like 9 legitimate games, and they have to go 5-4 in those, and win, and then beat all of the other teams.
Yeah.
To get to 60. Do you still feel like there's a shot?
I hate to be a pessimist, but I'm going to say no way.
Yeah, I don't think they get there either. Like, I'd love to get one of the Bucks games, but Giannis is... I feel like Giannis has decided he's not losing to the Raptors in the regular season.
Yeah, don't blame him either. And I mean, who knows with the Celtics because of the injuries and stuff. That's never an easy game. We've already seen what Denver can do depending on the injury situation. The Lakers are rolling right now. Memphis is a team that's like gunning for the playoffs and needs all the wins they can get. The Bucks are the Bucks. Houston is constantly trying to show that they're good.
I'm pretty happy with the way the Raptors match up with Houston, to be honest. Like, we talked about this when we did championship tiers 2 weeks ago, but for me, Houston's best path to a championship is getting out of the West and then hoping Toronto or Milwaukee isn't sitting there.
Yeah. I'm telling you, like I was even saying this, like, and I was on a couple different things saying this, so hopefully I don't get proven to be extremely dumb in the playoffs, which could happen. Um, but I continue to not believe in the Rockets. I just don't like because I think the Rockets, out of all the contending teams, are the team that they show you what they've got, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like all these other teams can do different things and like have coaches saving different stuff for the playoffs, and like you'd have to get so inventive. Like Mike D'Antoni would have to be so inventive with that team to like really have something different to show other teams because like you pretty much see what they do and that's it. Like they can't adjust.
That loss they had to the Clippers the other night was concerning because like
Yeah.
Kawhi had 25 points. Paul George had 13. They gave up 120 to the Clippers. Zubac put up 17 on 6 shots.
Yeah. Zubac.
I mean,
and but he's not like Anthony Davis.
yeah. Like when you and the Clippers' strength isn't even their size, but their size beat the crap out of the Rockets. And I like how are you going to do 6 games against Anthony Davis and then you got to go through the Clippers and like that's your path just to get to the Bucks?
Yeah. Talk about guys getting worn down, by the way.
Yep. So
like Covington and oh my god.
Last thing on a totally different note before we finish. The coronavirus stuff. The league's put out some memos today about it. They're talking about they put out a memo about potentially having to play games in the near future in empty arenas with no fans. They're limiting media access to the locker rooms right away. We saw... Or, no, the NBA is discussing it. The NHL went forward with that one.
Yeah, the NHL has done it. The NBA is still talking about it. They probably will do it, though, I would think.
Yeah. I remember last night, with when Trae Young was ruled out of the game, they said flu-like symptoms, and a whole bunch of people on Twitter suddenly went, I'm not sure we should be using that.
Yeah.
I mean, not to get political on the podcast, because I don't want to, even though I have political opinions, of course, as anybody who follows me on Twitter knows. But this is something that is going to affect the NBA going forward. We're only a month out from the playoffs. Coronavirus isn't going anywhere.
No.
And if you suddenly look to a point where teams are having to limit fan access to the arena and stuff like that, this could have a big impact on basketball, because there are arenas where teams have really strong home court advantages, and there are arenas where teams don't. And if you completely remove that as a factor, and all of a sudden every game's basically a neutral court game, that changes the playoffs a lot.
It changes the playoffs a lot. I mean, it's a weird thing. Like, did you see what LeBron said about it when they asked him last night?
He said he's not playing if there's no fans there, right?
So that's an interesting thing too, right? Because there you got the conscience, some would say, of the NBA basically saying, well, I'm not playing if there's no fans. Like, how many other players are going to be like, oh, yeah, I agree with LeBron. We're not going to do it. We're not going to play.
But, like, what do you do then? I don't know what the answer is, because...
I don't know. But, I mean, like, that could be a situation, right? Like, I mean, I legitimately could see a bunch of players being like, well, I guess we'll just, like, wait it out. Like, how weird would that be? Like, you can't postpone the playoffs, like, a long time.
If they cancel the playoffs, does that mean the Raptors are back-to-back champions?
By default. No one showed up to take the title, so Raptors keep it. Sounds good to me.
I remember it was due to completely different circumstances, but a couple of years ago there was a soccer game where, due to things with the fans, they were forced to play in front of an empty stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing some of the players who were involved in that game talking about it. And they said, like, it wasn't even so much not having crowd noise, it felt eerie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you'd see the same thing with basketball. Like, even beyond would the players show up, how do you have energy for that? Like, these guys, positive, negative, these guys feed off crowd energy.
Mm-hmm.
You have nothing. Like, do you pump in crowd noise on your audio system to try to rebuild some of that atmosphere? What do you? How would teams try to tackle that one?
I don't know. That'd be so bizarre.
Do you still do the player introductions?
I mean, I guess not. You're not introducing them to anybody. I don't know. It's like, so the guy with the mop knows who they are. I don't know. It's yeah. Like, I mean, I'm trying to think about it, and I'm like, even like in just a personal experience, like going to play pickup games. There's always like people around, you know. There's always like kind of like an atmosphere of like there's other people. Like if there's just an empty stadium and like everything's echoing and like you're so used to playing in like such a large amount of noise that you're screaming all the time and coaches are screaming and stuff, like this would be like the first time like Doc Rivers loses his voice because he could just talk normally and they'd be able to hear him. Like, it's so weird.
I mean, everybody's suddenly going to be a good free throw shooter.
Yeah, that'd be so interesting to like keep track of guys free throw shooting with like no crowd and see if it actually improves. That's like maybe the most nerdy thing I've ever said, but
I was thinking about the impact of this, and I was thinking like if it does come to that, there are going to be weird results. It's pretty much guaranteed there's going to be a game or a series that somebody loses that they have no business losing, just because the players are so thrown off by it. And we're going to be talking about this, like, if it comes to that, we're going to be talking about this like we talked about the lockout shortened seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Where it was like, well, those championships were weird because it was a short season, and it's going to be so odd. And I don't really know how to interpret that. The one they're talking about right now, where it's removing the media from the locker room, I get that. I mean, I've never been in a locker room. I get that affects media. I get that a lot of media people are good at taking the tone of a team by being in the locker room after the game.
Yeah.
And you lose that element. Sam Esfandiari on Twitter brought up that Ethan Sherwood-Strauss is really good at that with the Warriors. He's really good at going into the locker room, reading the team post-game, and taking things from that to his writing. And that is definitely going to be a missing element. But I think when you talk about how that's going to impact the way we see basketball compared to if we get to the point where a game has to be played in an empty arena, we're talking about entirely different things.
Oh yeah, completely different. And there's like more ways around it too with the media thing. But I am really looking forward to the post-game interview with Kawhi Leonard after there's like nobody in the arena and they're like, how did it feel? And he's just like, what do you mean? Was there anything different? Like, I'm looking forward to that so much.
It's basketball.
Yeah, it's basketball. I don't know what you're talking about. Seemed same to me.
Is this gonna hurt the Raptors if Kyle Lowry can't trash talk fans on the opposing team? Maybe it might he might like it a little better because he won't have to like punch somebody for trying to grab him from the opposing team for like the millionth time. I still can't believe, by the way, that might be the greatest like non-stat in Lowry's career, is that like two people from opposing teams like grabbed him and he hasn't punched them in the face. Kyle Lowry. The one with the Warriors owner during the finals, I am amazed that he didn't. Because even just like any human in that moment, you're in the middle of a really intense basketball game, your brain is at the level of like, this is like, your adrenaline's going, everything's going, you dive into the stands for a loose ball, which is like a normal thing. The players treat the fans like they're part of the environment.
Yeah.
And then a guy grabs you, your natural reaction would be to turn around and swing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Especially like a guy like Kyle Lowry who's so emotional and plays that way, and like it's really impressive to me. I still can't believe he didn't do it twice.
It's funny because he gets so much crap from opposing fans from being too emotional and too dirty and stuff like that. And that was such a controlled composure moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been saying this on Twitter lately, when especially around the All-Star game, when there were all those complaints about Kyle Lowry being, not a guy who's a star because of all the other stuff he does. Like, if Kyle Lowry was ever traded from the Raptors, the team that got him, it would take like 5 minutes of play, and every fan of that team would be a Kyle Lowry fan.
Yeah. I honestly thought that the All-Star game, the way Lowry played in the All-Star game, I thought it would show like all these people, like I thought they would understand better why everybody, like all Raptors fans love Kyle Lowry, and yet I guess there's just a certain sect of people who like hate winning basketball.
It's like people who dislike Marcus Smart. Like,
yeah.
I get it, you don't like him playing against your team, but how do you not respect that what the guy does is really valuable?
Yeah.
I think, there's a certain point where to be a competitive team, you kind of need one asshole on your roster.
Yeah, I think pretty much every team has one, right? Every team that's like been a contender pretty much has had one, right?
Yeah, you need one of those guys who will raise the level of the guys on your team when they have no energy, and who will get under the skin of the guys on the other side. And those things really matter. Like, I look back at that Bucks series last year, and one of the reasons the Raptors beat the Bucks was because they got under Eric Bledsoe's skin to the point where he was a completely different player.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, people say I don't like watching guys slide in to take charges. It's in the rule book. You don't want to see guys trying to take charges. Change the rule. Until you change the rule, it's part of basketball. I don't like the charge rule either, but
yeah, it's winning basketball.
Like, I don't like when shooters jump into the defender and draw a foul, but
yeah, true, same.
That's the same thing. You've got to change the rule.
Yeah.
So
that's the way it is.
Guys if you're paying guys millions of dollars to win basketball games, they're going to try to find ways to win basketball games.
Yeah.
It's like the Chris Paul thing when the Thunder won a game earlier this year because the untucked jersey.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, "Oh, that's such a Chris Paul thing to do." It's like, yeah, he won his team the game.
Yeah. Chris Paul, noted loser for sure. Yeah, no. This guy's been winning games his whole career. Whether you want to talk about the playoffs or not, he's been a winner.
Like I would be more mad at the player who checked into a game in a fourth quarter in a game-deciding situation and didn't have his jersey tucked in.
Mm-hmm.
You make that simple of a mental lapse that cost your team the game. That should be something we're critical of. Yeah,
I mean, like, give credit. It should be like Chris Paul should be getting credit for knowing that that's a thing.
Yeah. So anyways, we got about a month before the playoffs left. 20 or so games for most teams. Is there anything you're looking for? Just the last question before we go. Anything you're looking for these last 20 games? Anything you're looking at as something that'll give you more indicators of like where we're headed in the playoffs?
You mean like from Raptors' perspective or in general?
Maybe a little bit of both, but start with Raptors.
Okay. Raptors, I think in general, like we kind of talked about this. I think the same day we did our tiers. We talked about your tier list. Like, I think the main thing is like trying to see if the Raptors get most of the team back healthy. Hopefully Van Vliet will be back soon. Ibaka just came back. We'll see how soon Gasol is back, but he's been listed as questionable. And he's been doing practices and stuff and saying that he feels good, but we'll see. Just more sample size against like some of these better teams coming up and see how the Raptors play against them with like closer to a full squad and like what Nurse does with all those guys back. Like, I think that's just the most interesting thing from a Raptors perspective before you get to, obviously they're fighting for the second seed and that's a thing, but like before you get to the games where like you may start resting guys depending on where you are seating wise. I think that's the most interesting thing is some of this stretch here in March where you got that difficult stretch against the Sixers, Celtics, Denver, Lakers stretch is going to be interesting, especially if most of the rosters back. So I think that's something to watch for. Raptors wise.
I agree with that. I'd also add one more thing.
Yeah.
As they get healthy, what happens to Matt Thomas and Terrence Davis?
Yes, I think I'm more interested in what happens to Davis than Thomas because a lot of people have asked about like Thomas's minutes and stuff. I think it's kind of like always been the same thing. Like Thomas is pretty much what you knew he was coming into the season, although maybe like he's been a little bit more impressive defensively that like he tries and like sometimes he can stay with guys whatever. But he's always kind of been more like if there's a scenario in the playoffs where like he just would work really well matchup wise, or you just need some extra spacing or something, maybe you plug him in. But I don't see him being like in the 8-man rotation. Like I don't think that ever has changed. You know?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I was definitely thinking more Davis. Like if once they get everybody healthy, if McCaw's the 8th man, what happens to Davis? Because I think he needs to play.
Yeah, I think that's the more interesting one for sure. Yeah.
So going to the league as a whole, other teams, what's your indicator of playoff success that you're looking for from other teams?
I don't know. Like I mean, I kind of just most interested in seeing like I feel like a lot of teams we kind of know what they are at this point. I think the Clippers are still interesting because they've had a lot of injuries too. And they're kind of like still coming together a bit. Like the Rockets, we kind of know what they are. The Bucks, we have a pretty good idea for what they do and what they are. I don't know.
The Clippers, I'm very interested in if Joakim Noah can help their locker room.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting too. They've been grabbing every available dude on the market. Everybody's going to the Clippers apparently. The Sixers. Like the Sixers, I'm completely like they've been very confusing to me all season long, but I'm completely writing them off until they have Simmons back. Like if Simmons is done for the season, I just think they're done. You know?
Aren't they playing tonight without him or Embiid?
I believe so. Yeah. Because Embiid's like been I can't remember what Embiid's dealing with now, but yeah.
I am very interested in. As much as I'm interested in how the Sixers finish this season, I'm very interested in like if they don't suddenly figure it out.
Yeah.
What do they do this summer? Because
that's the
I
don't love
the idea of trading Embiid or Simmons for them.
Me neither.
But that temptation is going to be really strong if they don't suddenly turn it around.
Especially depending on how they lose. I mean, I think it changes a little bit if one or both of those guys is out in the playoffs. But like, say they were both available and somehow they lost in round one, like that's like a DEFCON 1 situation.
I saw on Twitter the other day, Ben Simmons has played more career games than Joel Embiid.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about like, Embiid was drafted 2 years before Simmons?
Yeah, 2014. Wiggins.
I think even if it's due to injury, there's going to come a point where the Sixers have to say, like, how late is too late to cut bait? And I don't know that I trust their front office entirely to find that moment, because their front office has had their ups and downs.
I think Brett Brown would be gone before either of those guys, to be honest.
And even that I don't love. I think Brown has been better than people give him credit for.
Me too. Yeah. Do you know, by the way, if like someone said to you right now, like if you had to trade Embiid or Simmons, do you know which one you would trade?
No.
Yeah. That's a tough question, right? Me neither. I switch my mind on it all the time.
The even harder part is, like, I would like to say the answer is it depends on who has the better trade market, but you can't even put feelers out on both of them. Because if you do, you risk it getting back to both guys that you put their names out on the market, and then maybe both guys decide they want out and you're... So you have to pick one, and I don't know how you do.
I don't either.
I think it might be easier to build around Ben Simmons, but I think Embiid's the better player.
I would agree with that. Like there's a roadmap to playing with Ben Simmons, right? It's make him your centerpiece and surround him with shooters. Like we've seen it work even in stretches in seasons past and stuff. But like that would be a successful team. To what degree, I don't know, but it would work. Yeah. But I agree that Embiid's got a higher ceiling, I think. The only other thing that I'm like weirdly interested in is okay. Well, I guess kind of two things. I think one, like to continue to see how fraudulent the Miami Heat are down the stretch of the season, and gonna get so much flack for that. I've been starting to say it, but like I don't know, man. Like I'm starting to feel like that's an actual thing because part of me is joking, and then the other part of me is like, they're losing some bad games here, and like not in good ways. And
they did beat the Bucks the other night.
They did beat the Bucks, yes, and Heat fans can hold on to that.
They have this crazy good record against like Toronto, Boston, Milwaukee, and the Sixers. And then they lose to so many terrible teams.
Yeah, they do. And they just lost to New Orleans last night. Was it last night? Yeah. And that's the other team that I'm interested in because the race for the 8th seed in the West is pretty interesting to me.
I am really enjoying watching that. Memphis has a 3-game lead right now, and I really want them to get it. But their schedule is so brutal the rest of the way.
It is. It's really hard. And New Orleans' schedule is not that hard.
And, like, the Spurs were the 9 seed, like just days ago, it feels like. They're in 12th now.
Mm-hmm.
Even Phoenix is only, like, 6 games out.
Yeah, and Nurkic is back and declared that Portland is going to make the playoffs.
And with Nurkic, like, if he's good, they're scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Sacramento's making a run. I don't really believe in them, but they're making a run.
I don't either.
The Pelicans, Zion has been phenomenal.
Yeah, it's been great.
And Memphis is dealing with a lot of injuries right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I want Dallas to not finish as the 7th seed would be my one other thing. I'd really like to see them bump up to 5th or 6th. And it's close, but I really just don't want them to go into a first-round series against the Clippers. Because I'd like to see them have a series that they can win first.
Me too. Yeah.
Good. I mean, I like Dallas, but Kawhi is going to destroy them if that series happens. And, you got Kawhi and Paul George against a team that needs all their offense to be created through Luka.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's going to be tough if that's their draw, which kind of sucks. But I am looking forward to watching the Mavs in the playoffs. The other thing I wanted to ask you was if the Pelicans do make the playoffs and they make the 8th seed, and the Memphis Grizzlies fall out of it, would you consider? If you had a vote, would you vote for Zion as Rookie of the Year because they made the playoffs?
I have thought a little bit about this one. Zion would be at what? 35 to 40 games, somewhere in there, right?
Yep.
How many did Embiid play the year that he didn't win Rookie of the Year?
He played 30-something, I think.
He played 31.
Yeah.
So I argued against Embiid winning Rookie of the Year that year in favor of
Me too.
Brogdon because I thought that Embiid didn't play enough games.
Yep.
So the question is, like, let's say Zion gets to 40, does an extra 10 games make that much difference? And, like, it's kind of the same thing. It's not a great rookie class. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of good rookies out of that class. I think we've seen that. But nobody's having an incredible rookie year. Mm-hmm. Just like that year. And I guess I would probably say give it to Zion. I wouldn't be happy about it. Because I'd like to be rewarding the whole season instead of just these couple months. But Zion has been so awesome, and like as good as Ja has been, I'm not sold.
It's hard, right? Like, so for me, I've kind of made up my mind already because I think the games played is obviously a detriment. I did the same thing with Embiid and Brogdon, and I said that Brogdon should win because Embiid hadn't played enough games. Zion might play more than Embiid. He just started playing back to backs. Um, I would still go against giving it to Zion for the games played, partly though because this is the difference between Embiid and Brogdon. The like talent difference and the effect on the team between those two guys was massive. Like when Embiid was on the floor, it was so much different than Brogdon being on the floor for his team. Whereas in this situation, like Jaw's been really, really good, and that game he had against the Lakers recently was awesome that they won.
Now,
Um,
to play devil's advocate there, Zion is
yeah,
45th in the NBA in player impact plus minus right now. Like
yeah,
45th in the entire league.
yeah. I mean, like he's having a huge impact on his team for sure, which is partly like if they get to the playoffs, it'll be a huge reason is because of him. I just think like Jaw's also having like maybe not the same level of impact, but a comparable impact anyway on the Grizzlies.
Jaws
Um,
Jaws PIPM right now is minus 0.01.
wow, really? I thought it'd be a little higher than that actually, but
Um,
still, still,
Terrence Davis
I think
unfortunately is down to third in rookie PIPM.
he's down to third. Ah, well, that's fine.
Zion and
He'll,
Brandon Clark are ahead of him.
oh, Brandon Clark, yeah, underrated rookie season. I think, well, also my vote still actually goes to Terrence Davis, of course. So
Like right now, Zion is he's played 500 minutes. Jaw has played 1,700.
yeah,
So if we prorate that, you figure that they're each probably going to get another 500-600 minutes, right? So it
hmm
would be at like 2,300 for Jaw, 1,100 for Zion.
hmm
So twice as many minutes.
hmm
Yeah, I think I'd probably end up going to Jaw then. Like,
yeah. I mean, that's the largest thing for me, and then I just think like I don't know, Jaw's been really good for a rookie, man. Like I don't know. Like I would say Zion's been better, but he just has been better for a much smaller period of time.
he's putting up 17 and 7 on decent shooting numbers. Like, you can't argue with that too much.
Yeah, and like people will say, like, what about the supporting cast? Well, like, I mean, the Grizzlies have like a solid team, um, but like the Pelicans, like they don't have a great bench, but they have a great starting lineup. To be honest, like their starting lineup's pretty good.
Ingram's been really good this year. Drew, I'm a huge Drew Holiday fan.
Yep, same.
Lonzo has looked great recently.
He has, yeah, he's been awesome. He's just like him and Zion now. The chemistry there is starting to become so fun. Like they're starting to make they should trademark the out of bounds lob play.
Yeah.
Like that's been awesome.
I, the thing about Zion that gets me is like in the last geez, it's been a long time. In the last decade, I don't know if I can remember two other rookies who I felt like came in and I immediately knew they were going to be superstars, like Luka and Zion. And when I think about the fact that like we get to watch another 15 years of these guys,
hmm
I'm just excited because like whoever whether Zion makes the playoffs or not, like it's not about this year. It's about next year. I think they're both going to be playoff teams. I think both of those guys are going to be. Luka's already in the top 5 in the league conversation. Zion's going to be getting there. And when I look at the things that people criticize Zion for, it's like, all he is an athlete. Things like that. Yeah, but he's the greatest athlete in the game, almost. Like,
Yeah.
he does things that look physically impossible.
hmm Yeah. He's just moving dudes out of the way that are like enormous people, like enormous human beings. It's terrifying.
He,
Um,
like, who was the center where he had the play where he just ripped the ball out of their hands, like, and he made them look.
who was? I think that was Giannis, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
ripped the ball right out of Giannis's hands like it was nothing.
Yeah, which is insane, insane. Like I don't know, he was moving like in the game, like he moved Rudy Gobert pretty easy. I saw he's done some stuff to Anthony Davis. Like this guy's a monster.
For a guy with that strength and that size, his first step is so insanely fast.
Yeah. And the second jump, if he misses,
Yep.
he's right back up there. He's like a freaking pogo stick. That guy's insane.
And he's got crazy, like, his body control when he's in the air is,
Hmm.
um, I, he's had alley oops this season where it's like, it, it looks like he shouldn't be able to get the ball, and he somehow maneuvers it into a shot.
Yeah.
Um,
He's like dunking on so many people that I'm starting to get worried about him landing on somebody and like hurting himself.
I, I don't know. Anybody who thinks regular season basketball isn't fun needs to watch more Zion.
Yeah. And Luca. By the way, Luca is what is he? Is he 20 now?
I
21?
I think he might have just turned 21.
21.
Let me,
And and speaking of PIPM, he leads the league in PI offensive PIPM,
by
and
like
it's
a full point over James
yeah,
Harden.
it's like not close at all. It's like 6 point something, and he's 21.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. This guy's in his second season. Oh my god.
He's averaging 28.4, 9.4, 8.7
Mm-hmm.
on like 58% true shooting.
Yeah.
Um,
At 21.
and he's doing it on a team that doesn't like the rest of that roster isn't even the roster that you would really want around him.
No. No, not really. And they've had injuries too.
He doesn't have like he's a pick and roll ball handler as a primary guy who right now doesn't have a role threat.
But yeah, by the way, I thought about you the other night when Porzingis actually finally rolled to the rim and had like a tomahawk dunk, and I was like, Anthony's gonna be so happy. He finally rolled to the rim and he dunked it.
All Porzingis has to do is realize that it's okay to make physical contact when he sets a screen, and that offense will find a whole new level. He slips every screen that he sets.
Yeah, he does.
Like, can you? I know this is the Raptors homer in me, but can you imagine if you gave Luka Doncic Jonas Valanciunas for a season?
Oh my god. Good lord. I can't.
That would be so much fun. But
Mm-hmm.
on another team that needs a role threat is the Raptors right now.
Yeah, would love a roll threat. That'd be amazing.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna call it there. We got about we I thought we were running out of stuff to talk about like half an hour ago, and then we just kept going. So
Yep, happens.
Thanks everybody who hung out in chat. Thanks for everybody watching on YouTube. Anything you want to plug, Josh?
Nothing at the moment. No, no, I think I'm good.
All right. We'll be back next week. I'm probably going to try to get a guest next week. As much as I enjoyed doing these ones with us two, it does seem like there are a lot of people who like the episodes with guests. I'm going to look at who we can get to try to get somebody to bring an interesting perspective on this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting down the stretch run of the season into the playoffs this year. So
Yeah, me too.
thank you to everybody who hung out.